Ever get that feeling like a deer in the headlights when somebody asks you a really tough question?
Yeah.
Like your brain totally knows the answer's in there somewhere, but it decides to just like hide at the worst possible moment.
Oh, absolutely. That feeling of being put on the spot
Yeah.
happens to all of us. But it is fascinating, though.
Yeah.
What if thinking quickly, quick thinking is less about like a natural talent and it's more about skills that we can actually like develop?
That's exactly what we're diving into today. We've got a ton of research and practical tips all about just becoming a quicker thinker.
Yeah.
Because honestly, whether it's a job interview or a super tense meeting, or even just like a casual conversation that goes in a direction you weren't expecting, being able to think on your feet
Mm-hmm.
is a huge advantage.
Yeah, it really is. And it's not about being a robot. You don't want to be like spitting out canned responses.
Right.
It's more about just having a really agile mind that helps you assess the situation, gather your thoughts, and then, respond in a way that is both thoughtful and impactful.
Yeah, for sure. So it's not speed that we're looking for here. It's more about clarity.
Right.
So what are some of the things we can actually do to train our brains
Yeah.
to get them to be more responsive when we're under pressure?
So one of the simplest, but like the most powerful techniques is just learning to pause before you react. So it seems kind of counterintuitive, right? Because when you feel that pressure to respond, you just want to jump right in.
Yeah.
But just taking like a conscious breath, even if it's just for like a second or two,
Go.
can make a huge difference.
I can see how that could help because then you're not just like blurting out the first thing that pops into your head, which, isn't always the most strategic.
Right.
But doesn't it seem like you're being hesitant or unprepared if you wait too long to answer?
Oh, absolutely. It's really about finding that sweet spot. Like, you don't want to be silent for an awkwardly long time,
Right.
but instead you just acknowledge the question and then you signal that you're taking a second to think. So you can use a simple phrase like, "That's a really interesting question. Let me think about that for a moment."
Gotcha.
And that buys you time, but also shows that you're taking it seriously.
Yeah, it's like you're controlling the pace instead of letting the pressure
Exactly.
control you.
Yeah.
Okay, so we've paused, taken a breath.
Mm-hmm.
Now what?
Okay.
What do we do? How do we actually start to come up with that, awesome reply?
So often what makes us freeze up is feeling overwhelmed, like by how much information we're trying to process all at once.
Mm.
So that's where chunking comes in.
Chunking.
Yeah. So imagine you're trying to remember a really long number.
Okay.
It's a lot easier if you break it down into smaller chunks.
So yeah, like phone number. We
Yeah.
just automatically group them into those smaller sets of digits
That's
just to
it.
make them easier to remember.
Exactly. So are we applying that same thing to complex ideas or even
I
questions?
see. Okay.
Exactly. So it's about taking that big, scary piece of information and then breaking it down into those bite-sized pieces that are more manageable.
Okay.
So let's say someone asks you to summarize a really complicated project
Mm.
instead of trying to explain everything at once.
Right. Which would be overwhelming.
Yeah, you might start rambling.
Right.
You can chunk it.
So instead of like a fire hose of information,
Yeah.
you're giving them more of a sprinkler system.
I love that. That's such a good way to put it.
Thanks.
You could say something like, okay, let me break this down into the 3 key phases. So first we did the initial research, then the development process, and then finally the implementation. And that not only makes it easier for you to explain,
Yeah.
but it also helps the listener follow along and they can grasp those main points.
Oh, for sure.
Yeah.
So chunking is like creating a roadmap
Yes.
in your mind
Yes.
for both you and the person that you're talking to.
Precisely. It's a way to manage that complexity and make sure that you're being really clear and effective when you communicate your ideas.
I'm realizing that that's something I kind of do automatically.
Yeah.
When I'm learning something new, I try to break it down into smaller pieces so it doesn't feel so overwhelming.
Oh, that's great.
But I never really thought to apply it to these situations where I need to think quickly.
Yeah, it's a great technique.
Okay, so we've paused to keep from panicking. We've chunked the information to avoid being overwhelmed.
Mm-hmm.
What's next? What's our next tool in our quick thinking arsenal?
So if chunking is about breaking things down, our next technique is about putting those pieces back together in a way that is persuasive and coherent.
Okay.
So we call this using frameworks.
Framework, so like mental scaffolding to help us organize our thoughts.
Exactly. So these are pre-established structures or models that you can use to help guide your response, especially when you're feeling pressured.
Okay.
And a classic example of this is the problem solution benefit framework.
Oh, yeah, I've definitely heard of that one before.
Yeah.
So if somebody asks you how you handled a certain challenge at work, you could use that framework to kind of...
Exactly. So you could say, we were facing this problem, and to address it, we did this, which resulted in this benefit.
I see.
And it's a very clear, concise, logical way to structure your answer, even if you only have a few seconds to think.
Right. So it's like having that mental template ready.
Yeah.
So you're not just like, oh my God, how do I answer this?
Yeah, it takes a lot of pressure off.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And it makes sure that you're addressing all of the key points without getting distracted or rambling.
Absolutely. And, there are a lot of other useful frameworks out there.
Yeah.
It just depends on the situation.
Right.
So, for example, if you're discussing a project that has changed over time, you could use the past, present, future framework.
Okay, so for the past, present, future, you could say something like, this is how this project started,
Yeah.
this is where we are now, and this is where we're headed.
Exactly. And by having these frameworks, you're not just reacting, you're shaping the conversation.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense.
Yeah.
This is all starting to feel very practical. It's not like you need to be a genius or magically know every answer.
Right?
It's about just having this mental toolkit that you can use
Exactly.
to approach anything with more confidence.
Mm-hmm.
But I'm guessing all of this mental strategizing, all this stuff that we're talking about,
Mm-hmm.
probably works best when we're also feeling calm and collected.
Oh, you're absolutely right. We can have all the mental techniques in the world, but if our bodies are all tense and stressed out,
Right.
it's going to be way harder to think straight. So that brings us to our next technique.
Which is all about staying calm.
Yes.
Okay, tell me everything.
Yeah.
What can we do in those moments when our heart is racing and our mind feels like it's going to explode?
All right. So this is where we really look at the connection between our mind and body.
Okay.
Because when we get those stress hormones, our
Right.
thinking gets all cloudy, It's like that primal instinct, like fight, flight, or freeze.
Yeah.
But we can actually learn to control that by changing our physical state.
Okay, so what's the quick thinking version of like hitting the chill button on our stress?
Deep breathing.
Okay.
Deep, deliberate breaths. That's like your secret weapon when you
Okay.
feel that tension rising.
Yeah.
Just focus on slowing down your breath.
Yeah.
So take a deep breath in, hold it for a few seconds, and then just exhale slowly.
Okay.
It sounds so simple, but it sends a signal to your nervous system that everything is okay.
Yeah, I know that even taking a few deep breaths can really change how I feel.
Mm-hmm.
But sometimes when I get stressed, I also get that tunnel vision
Yeah.
where my focus just narrows.
Yay.
How do we open that back up?
So that's where grounding techniques come in,
Okay.
and they're all about shifting your attention to your physical senses.
Oh, okay.
So feel your feet on the floor.
Mm,
Feel the weight of your body in the chair. Notice the temperature of the air on your skin, things like that.
gotcha.
And that can really help bring you back to the present moment.
It's like reminding your brain that you're not in a life or death situation.
Exactly.
You're just like having a regular conversation,
Yeah, exactly.
even if it's kind of a challenging one.
Right.
This makes me think about those athletes
Mm-hmm.
and like their pre-performance routines.
Yeah.
It's a lot of these same techniques, right? Like deep breathing, visualization, focusing on how their body feels.
Yeah.
It's all about getting into that right headspace to perform their best.
Exactly. And just like athletes train their bodies and minds, we can train ourselves
Oh, I like that.
to be more resilient
Mm-hmm.
and, just better at responding when we're under pressure.
Yeah, absolutely. So we've got those 5 key techniques: the pausing, the chunking, using frameworks, practicing scenarios, and then staying calm physically.
Yeah.
I'm curious, though, how this actually plays out in real life.
Oh, yeah, that's a great question.
So let's imagine you're in a meeting and your boss just suddenly asks you for your opinion on a new project,
Okay.
but you're only kind of familiar with it,
Mm-hmm.
and you start to feel those deer in the headlights starting to come on. What do you do?
The first thing is don't panic
Okay,
and blurt out the first thing you think of.
right.
Take a pause.
Gotcha.
You could say, that's a great question. Let me gather my thoughts for a second.
Boom. You just bought yourself some time and didn't even look flustered.
Exactly.
Love it.
So while you're taking that pause, you can start chunking.
Yeah.
So what do you actually know about the project?
Right.
What are the main goals? What could be some of the challenges? Are there any areas where your expertise might be helpful?
Okay, so you're breaking it down into smaller pieces that are easier to think about.
Exactly. So now it's not this big, scary project. It's just smaller pieces of information.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense.
So to structure your response, you could then use that problem solution benefit framework. So even if you don't have all the answers,
Mm.
you can still share your perspective.
Okay.
So you could say something like, from what I understand, one of the biggest challenges is going to be this. One solution might be to try this. And if that works, it could lead to this benefit.
See, now you're a strategic thinker who's ready to contribute, even though you weren't totally ready for that question.
And because you've practiced this,
Right.
you can deliver your answer confidently and clearly.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
And all the while you're breathing deeply,
Yeah.
staying calm. It's
Exactly.
awesome how all of this comes together to take a potentially awkward situation and turn it into your moment to shine.
Yeah. Yeah.
But what about in those moments outside of work where you don't really have time to prepare?
So let's say you're at like a party or something,
Okay.
and somebody brings up, I don't know, a complicated topic.
Mhm.
Maybe it's something that's happening in the news or some philosophical debate, and it's something you haven't really thought about.
Yep.
So it's easy to feel like you need to have this brilliant response right away.
Yeah, like, oh, I don't want to sound dumb, but I also don't want to pretend to be an expert.
Exactly. So
Yeah.
how do you deal with that pressure?
Yeah, that's a good question.
It's the same stuff.
Yeah.
Remember, it's okay to pause
Yeah,
and acknowledge what they said. You could even say something like, that's a really interesting point. Let me think about that for a second.
that's great because it's not weak to ask for a moment to think.
Right.
It's actually smart.
It shows that you're thinking about it.
Yeah, exactly.
And while you're taking that pause,
Yeah.
you can mentally chunk that topic. So what are the main parts of it?
Okay.
What are the different perspectives? You can even ask a question to get yourself more time to think.
Right.
Like, when you say this, do you mean this?
I see.
So you're not just trying to come up with an answer you don't have. You're trying to understand the issue.
Yeah, okay.
And this is how you go from feeling flustered
Right.
to feeling like you're in control. And then from there, you can use a framework.
Okay.
You could talk about how the views on this topic have changed over time, what's
Mm.
happening right now, and what might happen in the future.
Yeah, that makes sense.
So it shows that you're engaged with the topic,
Right.
even if you don't have all the answers.
Exactly. And you're curious and willing to learn, which is way more impressive than pretending to be an expert.
Oh, for sure. And that's really what quick thinking is all about, being flexible, resourceful, and confident that you can handle whatever comes up.
Yeah.
It's not about being perfect. It's about being present, engaged, and ready to learn.
This feels like less of like a set of techniques and more like a mindset shift,
Mm-hmm.
like a new way to approach any challenge with calm and clarity, knowing that you have the tools to handle it.
Yeah, I think that's a great way to put it. It's about being mentally agile and resilient
Mm,
so that you can handle anything life throws at you.
absolutely. And the best part is, this is stuff we can actually get better at just by practicing.
Oh, absolutely. The more you do this, the more it becomes second nature.
Right.
Like working out a muscle, the more you train it,
Yeah.
the stronger it gets.
Exactly. And just like with physical training, it's not about being perfect all the time.
Yeah,
It's more about making progress.
that's such a good point.
Right.
Quick thinking isn't about always having the perfect answer.
Right.
It's about being calm, thinking clearly, and responding in a way that makes the conversation better.
That just takes a lot of the pressure off.
Right.
Because it's not about knowing everything.
Exactly.
It's more about being engaged and flexible and being open to learning.
Exactly. And that's what makes quick thinking so useful,
Yeah.
no matter what you're doing.
Right.
So, you could be in a meeting and get a tough question, or in a weird social situation,
Yeah.
or just have to make a decision really fast. These techniques can help you feel more confident.
Yeah, for sure. So let's recap for everyone listening. What are like the 5 big things they can start using today?
All right. So first, remember to pause. Okay.
Don't just react right away.
Yeah.
Take a breath. Give yourself a second to think.
Gotcha. Number 2.
Chunk that information.
Okay.
Take those big ideas and break them down into smaller pieces.
Love it.
3, use those frameworks.
Okay.
Having models like problem solution benefit can help structure your answers in a good way.
Okay, that makes sense.
4, practice.
Right.
The more you do it,
Yeah.
the easier it gets.
Right.
And finally, remember that when your body is calm,
Yeah,
your mind is clearer.
for sure.
Take those deep breaths,
Yeah.
stay grounded, and manage that stress.
I love it. It's like we gave everyone listening a brain upgrade today.
I hope so.
But before we go, I want to leave everyone with one last thing to think about.
Okay.
Think about a time when you were caught off guard. Mm-hmm. How do you think using these techniques would have changed what happened?
That's a great question to think about.
Right.
It shows how powerful these techniques are,
Yeah.
not just for new challenges, but also for looking back at old ones. Because we can always learn and grow
Yes,
and become better thinkers and communicators.
absolutely.
Awesome. Well, that wraps up this deep dive.
That was fun.
I know, right? Until next time, keep thinking sharp and
Yes,
those responses quick.
for sure.
We'll see you at the next deep dive.